So let's come out of that adjournment. The Police Minister, Senzo Mchunu, has been responding to MPs in Parliament investigating allegations made by KwaZulu-Natal Commissioner Lieutenant General Nhanhla Mkhwanazi. The committee will be back at 4 p.m. But let's just take a moment before we continue to get analysis from one of our guests and bring you this breaking news. As you can see it there, of course, on your screen. We understand there's been a mass shooting reported in Westbury, that's in Johannesburg. At least 6 teenagers were shot. 2 of them, we understand, were declared dead on arrival by the police, and 4 are receiving medical attention. We'll continue to give you more details as and when they come with regards to that particular story. Quite concerning there. At this stage, it's not known what led to that particular shooting, but one of our reporters, Calvin Rudla, is on his way to the scene, and we'll get him on the line as soon as he gets there, just to get an understanding, of course, given the fact that there's been a number of shootings in the country, and this one also a mass shooting, we understand, from police. Let's now bring in a political analyst, Professor Sipho Seepe, just to give us a sense in terms of what his thoughts have been around the Ad Hoc Committee that we've been watching essentially throughout the day. Prof, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. I want to get your impressions then on essentially the MPs questioning Police Minister Senzo Mchunu there. He spoke about his relationships with potentially, 2 gentlemen or 2 men who have really been at the center of some of these allegations, speaking there and responding to his relationship with a number of people. Perhaps let's get your response to what he has said. The minister reiterating that his relationships have been above board, denying any involvement with organized crime or criminal syndicates, but he has responded to questions around Brown Mkhosi, as well, of course, as Vusumuzi Kat Matlala. Just your comments around his testimony so far.
Well, he has been very consistent. One must remember what he's accused of. He is accused of consorting with individuals who are themselves suspected of having been involved in some criminality. But what was important is not so much that aspect, that his decision to disband the political killings task team was done as a way of protecting those individuals. So he was offered an opportunity to respond to those charges or accusations that here you had a minister who seems to be engaged in making decisions that one could say are frustrating the proper operation of the police. And what he was able to put across are a number of things. And he has been consistent in that. One is that when he wrote that letter, it was not because he was informed by external forces. He did it for a number of reasons. But when you listen to those reasons, it appeared that he also has been almost not consistent in terms of which reason is the one that was overwhelming to push him to the disestablishment of the task team. The first reason that he gave was anyway, the political task team or task teams in the police force are temporary. They are there to serve a particular purpose, and once they've served that, then you move on. So that was his argument, that it could never be never-ending. The second thing that he then said, which he put in the letter, is that this task team has no value. And that had been challenged by a number of witnesses, including somebody like Seepe, who talked about how effective they were. But you're talking about the 3 generals here, Masemula, you have Mkhwanazi, now you have Seepe, and also the president, who had seemed to be quite happy with the performance of the task team. So his argument that this has no value seems to be questionable. So that was the second reason that he provided, which has loopholes. The third reason that he had raised was that there were complaints about the conduct of the PKTT. And he had received that from a number of people, and including somebody like Professor Mary de Haas. So that is another reason that he was trying to marshal around this issue. But what he could not answer pointed questions like, but within the police force, there are a number of task teams. And when you disbanded this, did you do an audit of the task teams? And why specifically this particular one? Or did you actually close others? So he was a bit cagey around responding to that, talking about the integration. But the question was, before you disband anything, you surely would have sought information and reports to look at whether this task team needs to be put. So it was those type of probing questions that became almost disdainful for the minister. And you could see him becoming almost a bit irritated. But nonetheless, he kept on using the same argument that one, I have no relationship with these people that you're talking about. And wherever it was possible, if it's pointed out that you know them, he'll then say, well, the question that was asked is different one. I was asked whether he's a comrade or an associate, and I responded that he is a comrade but not an associate. But if the minister was clear saying, I know this person, and he is a comrade. But when you start by almost denying, and later you retract your statement and say, well, the question was a different one, it doesn't augur well to the public. They tend to think that here you've got something to hide.
Yeah, especially just going back, Prof, to your earlier statements about his reasoning with disbanding the PKTT. I mean, he was asked on several occasions too in terms of did he think that the political killings task team was indeed successful, of which he agreed to that. So it does then, give a very difficult case on his part to it's just some of the MP's questions in terms of why then did you not at the very least consult or, just perhaps look at some of the data that has been shown. But I want to move on to this, Prof, before that committee resumes. One of the other difficult points that was, pushed to the minister was on his claims that he was threatened by KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Commissioner Nhanhla Mkhwanazi during a conversation between General Mkhwanazi and Mchunu's Chief of Staff, Cedric Ngabinde. MPs refusing to accept as evidence the claims by the minister. Of course, you will remember that there was that audio recording that he brought last week, but still could not find those threats within that recording.
Yeah, and actually, as a matter of fact, the recording is publicly available. But when you listen to that which is publicly available, you do not get a sense of threat. So what you get is a sense of frustration that was coming from Mkhwanazi. And even so, Mkhwanazi was also a person who appears to want to engage with the minister around whatever the minister's concerns were. But one must also remember that another reason that he also gave was his attempt to say this closure of the task team was also part of the trying to make optimal use of the resources. He kept on using the word of optimization. But really, when you start having a number of reasons, it appears like you want to push as many reasons, hoping that one of them will stick. So you saw a bit of evasiveness on the minister. Yes, you could also argue that those things are mutually reinforcing, but he remained in a position where he could not be believable in terms of what he says were the reasons for his decision to disestablish or disband this team. And also, when you have the operations and you have senior people in the police force with experience, surely the most reasonable thing as a minister is to want to get along and to invite them to say colleagues or comrades or whatever you call them. Here's my view. And how would you actually put this in operation? And you also remember that even his use of the language, immediate, and they were pointing out to him that when you're talking about immediate, then you are actually obstructing the police in terms of doing their work. And then he had to explain and give a new meaning to what immediate meant. But therefore, people who are in operations, once the minister says that this must be stopped immediately, they read it differently. And he could have thought about it. But because he was writing this without advice, this is what you end up with. And of course, when I say he was writing that without advice, I'm simply saying what he was saying. But Mkhwanazi says any reasonable person would have taken efforts to try to talk to the police chiefs to say, in terms of what I'm thinking, this should be the line of thought and the line of march.
Prof, talk to us about, just Mchunu's assertions in terms of how he then approached this particular matter with President Cyril Ramaphosa. You will recall, of course, what Mkhwanazi had initially said in as far as wanting an audience with the president and him getting the impression that President Cyril Ramaphosa was not really aware about the disbandment of the PKTT. However, this contrasts somewhat to what the police minister has been saying.
Yeah, of course, this is, again, the issue of who can you believe, because this matter was so serious that the National Commissioner decided to talk to President Ramaphosa, who himself, according to him, to Masembula, was actually surprised. But Mchunu then later indicated that he spoke to the president. But it becomes unclear until the president takes a position on this. What we have will be clear speculation. The president, they needed to come out to say, I was briefed. But then you must also ask, if he was briefed, why would you suspend a person who has done nothing wrong? So there's a difficulty in deciding to say, and I should also not say suspend, I should actually use the right word that he used to say, put him on a leave of absence until he can clear this matter. But it is clear that this matter is receiving serious attention within Parliament. And of course, there are other revelations that are emerging from Madlanga, which also seem to give credence to the concern that was raised by Mkhwanazi to say, we have an infiltration here of the criminal justice system by cartels, and that involves almost everybody. This is why at the moment we have the hearings being also done in camera, where the witnesses say they fear for their lives, and it becomes very concerning. But what is also concerning is what appears to be a turf war or factions within the police force. Mkhwanazi did actually say, if this was not stopped, you were going to end up with the cops shooting each other, which is really very worrying. So I do think that the parliamentarians are doing a good job in terms of probing this further and following it up. But one could also say the minister has continuously stood his ground. But as I say, his reasons, he seems to have too many reasons why he chose the PKTT. And that is very unconvincing. There should be one good reason. There should have been forensic audit. He should have consulted the people who have been engaged with this. He should have also have consulted his colleagues who continued to give or renew the mandate of the PKTT.
And of course, that word immediate, also one of the words that is in contention here in terms of his letter. But Prof, thank you so much for your analysis thus far. Really do appreciate it. Political analyst Professor Sipho Seepe just weighing in on the evidence so far by Police Minister Senzo Mchunu at the Ad Hoc Committee.